A lot of people think my story is, I found God and then I stopped porn. It's not that simple. Just being reckless, being promiscuous, partying all the time led me into the adult film industry. The period of my life where I was completely anti-God had just so happened to be the period of his life that he came back into the church. That night, I was able to fall asleep thinking, okay, now I just have to kill myself. And now my husband takes me to a Catholic mass. Even at that point, I was still so mad at God. But I could talk to Mary. I saw her. I closed my eyes and she appeared to me. And that's when I was like, okay, well, you really can't have it both ways. You've committed to becoming Catholic. You have to stop doing pornography. As soon as I accepted the Eucharist, it's just gratitude.
Friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm so thankful that you are here today for another interview. Today, we've got a very special guest. My new friend, Bree Solstad, is joining us, and Bree came here today to talk to us all about her amazing journey into the Catholic faith. But where she comes from is a place that many of us are going to be blown away when we hear her story. It's so incredible. I first got to know Bree on Twitter, or X now, as the kids call it, when I noticed that she was talking a little bit about unpacking the Mass and some different things, how it was helpful to her. And I looked into her account a little bit, and I was blown away because she had spent so much time in the adult industry as a producer and a creator of films that many of us would be shocked. And here she is, not just someone who consumed that content, someone who created it, and yet has found her way into Christ's Holy Catholic Church and is on fire for the faith. If you follow Bree on Twitter, you've seen that she has so many amazing things to share today, and she's here with us today. I'm so thankful that she is joining us. So Bree, welcome to Iowa and welcome to my channel. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's just an incredible honor to be here. You've been such an influence for me throughout my journey. I mean, even before I was confirmed during RCIA, I started listening to your podcast, and it's just such an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor for us. Estelle and I have had a blast getting to know you and your husband, and we're going to talk today about so many things, and I'm very excited to be able to get into your story. I've heard you share your story a few other places, and you're starting to be asked more and more to share because you have such a powerful experience of coming out of this industry into a new life for you, and we're going to get into all of that. But I want to start by asking you to share a little bit about your upbringing. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I was raised by a single mother. I was an only child. I actually never knew my father. But I had a really wonderful relationship with my mom, and I felt like she really did the job of both. I know now in hindsight that nobody can really take the place of a father figure, but at the time I thought that everything was wonderful, and we went to church every Sunday. I was really active in my youth group. I went to church camp every summer, just what I thought was a basic normal life.
So you're growing up, your mom is raising you without a dad. I've talked to a lot of people who grew up without fathers, and that sometimes can lead to some struggles with understanding God. What was your relationship with God like in the midst of that?
Certainly. I don't think that it really impacted me all that greatly, in all honesty, because I never had a father figure. So it wasn't like I was anti-God the Father, because I just never knew what a father should do or could do, all the benefits from having a male role model. So that never really impacted me. I loved the Lord as a child, as a youth. I thought that it was a wonderful way to, express what was going on in my life. I prayed a lot.
What kind of church did you grow up in?
Lutheran.
Lutheran church.
Mm-hmm.
And where did you grow up?
Anchorage, Alaska.
Alaska.
Yeah.
So that's a lot different from what a lot of people might have experienced. I've always wanted to go to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
So,
should.
Man, maybe someday. But when you were a little girl learning about faith and stuff, is that something you stuck with like through your high school years, or was there a time in your life when maybe you made a decision to either go further into your faith or go away from it?
Okay, it was not something I stuck with. And even my relationship with God as a Lutheran, as a young person, was a lot different needless to say that it is now. Um, but I recall, even through high school, even through my, early adult life, when I prayed, it was mainly to ask for things. It was mainly when I was in trouble and I needed something from God. It was hardly ever about gratitude. And then also, I think the Lutheran insight into Christianity really played a part in my choices later in life, because Martin Luther is pretty well known for saying, he said from the pulpit, like, I can commit adultery 100 times and still be forgiven as long as I, quote, accept our Lord and Savior into my heart. Then everything's fine. I can live however I want to be. And I really took that message and ran with it.
So did you have a desire to follow God but because of the different things that you were going through, would you say that you had a moment when you were like, I'm just done with this? Or was it kind of a slow turning away from God?
It wasn't necessarily that I turned away from God, but it was more like, I read in Nicholas de la Torre's book, we all have a God-sized hole in our hearts. And that's true of even people who have no knowledge of Christianity. Think of like ancient Aztec civilizations. Mm-hmm. Who is our creator? We all are trying to look for some reason why we're here, some meaning to life. And within that God-sized hole, we can put different things. And I initially had God, and then I went away to college and just pretty much, I don't know, like lost a lot of my faith. And not so much that I turned away from God, but it was more, I put a lot of other things in his place. And so many things became more important to me. Alcohol, promiscuity, recklessness, seeking attention from males in particular. And I know that stems from my lack of father figure. Yeah. But those things were the most important thing to me. It's just how hard can I party? When can I get the next high? Like, how can I get out of this reality here and live it up?
When you went to college, did you go to church at all? Or did you just sort of say, all right, I've graduated from high school. I've graduated from my faith too?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of kids do that. I feel like we brought up our kids in church, but then as soon as they're out from our watchful eye and we're not the ones taking them, mm-hmm. unless they've had their own personal, powerful experience where their faith has been owned by them, they don't think to themselves, okay, I'm on my own. Where am I going to go to church? They mm-hmm. think, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, I had friends in college who went to church, so I certainly had the opportunity. It wouldn't have been that difficult. But in my mind, I think it was too difficult because it happens in the morning, and almost every morning I was hungover. I loved just being reckless, being promiscuous, partying all the time.
So when you were going through all that stuff, did you even give a thought to your faith at all, or was it just something you put on the back burner?
I did actually think a lot about my faith, but I thought of it in like kind of a compartmentalization kind of way, where God is over here and I'm over here, and I still believe in God and I still have a relationship with Jesus, but it has nothing to do with my life. My faith is my own, it's in my heart, and it has nothing to do with the things that are going on around me, the things that I'm participating in.
We always have this thought of a personal relationship with God. We hear about that all the time. Mm-hmm. But sometimes if our relationship with God becomes too personal, then it turns into a thing that we can control.
Right. Yeah.
It turns into a thing, well, because it's my personal relationship with God, I get to do it my way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I get to decide what I'm going to do. Is that kind of where you were?
Precisely.
That just hit me. So tell me, like, where did that eventually lead you?
Well, it led me into the adult film industry, pretty much. It wasn't right away, but I had made partying such an important part of my life that I stopped going to classes. It didn't happen right away. It was kind of gradual. And then I decided, well, maybe I'll take a year off. And that year became the rest of my life, something that I still regret. And from there, during that year off, I went from like one meaningless job to another and never really found anything very satisfactory. And at that point, I was given an opportunity to be my own boss, to create my own content, to work from home, and I jumped at it. I thought it'd be amazing.
What do you mean you were given an opportunity to do that? I mean, I'm trying, and we don't need to like dig too far into all the nitty gritty of it, but I'm just curious, like, because you hear people getting lured into that type of thing. What was that like for you?
Okay, well, it wasn't something like I was groomed into being this person. I should go back and say, my drinking, my partying, like most people, it escalates. And even just from like a physical standpoint, you require more and more to get the same dopamine hits as before, to get that same level of drunken absurdity. And so also my promiscuity and my recklessness just increased over and over in multitudes. And at one point, I don't even know how I came up with the idea, but at one point I thought that it would be really amazing if I started a blog about my activities, about how I was constantly cheating on my boyfriend. I was constantly like, wasted all the time. I just, it sounds embarrassing and pathetic now, but people wanted to hear about it. They were thrilled. Voyeuristic type of a blog where I described all these salacious things as somebody who, I don't even care about this. I don't care about my boyfriend. Like, look how cool I am. Look how amazing I am. And all these guys I'm sleeping with. And that blog caught the attention of a pretty prominent sex worker, and she who produced pornography, and she was in the industry where it's really centered on female empowerment and female domination and financial domination. And she explained it to me, that I could create these videos from home. I could be my own boss, make my own hours. I could, play, like my favorite game as a child was dress up. So how much fun was it going to be to put on all these different personas and be, this bratty princess? And it sounded really great. It sounded like a great opportunity. And one thing that stuck with me is she said, based on reading your blog and talking to you, I think you'd be perfect for this. And at the time I was like, wow, what a compliment, right? But
Wow.
I look back on it and like, she saw the narcissism in me. She saw the egotistical way that I was willing to step on others to get what I wanted and be the center of attention all the time. And looking back on it, yeah, that's really foreshadowing. And, she herself was really good and really successful in the industry. And so she kind of showed me the ropes, and she never promised that I would make a huge amount of money, but it turned out that she was right. I was a really narcissistic person, and I was really good at not just playing the bratty princess, but I was the bratty princess. Initially it didn't start off with like a huge amount of money coming in, but I was able to play that person for so long and so well that it really became who I was inside.
That's a huge realization, I think, that a lot of people get involved with things that they know are wrong, and they think they can just dabble in it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, well, that's not who I really am, but whatever. But like you talked about, in some ways you were like playing dress up to become someone else, and then eventually that's who you just became.
Yeah, people advise you like as good advice, fake it till you make it. Well, that can work the same way against you. I was faking it until I finally I came to the realization that this is no longer an act. This really is who I am. And I could see it in my relationships, not just with my clients, but with friends or with my husband, that, I would it really got under my skin when he would try to advise me on like the best things to do or something like, who are you to advise me? And I could see it even, you know, even driving down the road, like, how dare you cut me off? And like, I saw that it really impacted so many aspects of my life that I didn't realize at the time, but now thankfully I do.
I think there's so many people that can relate to what you just said, because nobody wakes up and says, today I want to become an alcoholic or a drug addict or a sex worker or whatever you want to call it. None of us ever think that the things that we dip our toe into the water of are eventually going to control us and become who we are. I can't remember where I heard this, but it's a good saying, but it said that sin will always take you farther than you want to go, cost you more than you're willing to pay, and make you do things you never thought that you would do.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Now, so when you're in the middle of all this, did you ever have a moment when you realized, when you did have that moment that you realized, this is who I've become? Did you care? Did that scare you? Or were you just kind of like, all right, whatever, let's just go with it?
It's kind of twofold. Like, I realized, well, this is who I've become. And then it's like, heck yeah, this is who I've become. You know, girl power. What's up? Female empowerment. I'm amazing. I'm making all this money and I have this great body and I have all these incredible clothes. Every now and then I thought to myself, well, and it wasn't even, I admit it's not even like the morality of it. It was kind of like, well, you can't do this forever. So what are you going to do after your looks go? You know, after, I don't know, there comes a point when you can no longer do pornography because you're no longer as attractive as you were in your 20s. And I kept pushing that off, like, and every now and then, actually, yeah, with specific clients, I'm like, I'm really pushing them way too far. And I'm really, like, being abusive at this point. And it was about abuse. That's what they were asking for. And that's not in quotes. That's literally what they were asking for, what they were paying me for. But sometimes I know I took it too far. And every now and then I would think, well, maybe there's something else that I should be doing instead. And then as soon as that thought entered my mind, I'd immediately dismiss it because I just can't look at that, you know?
Yeah.
What does that mean to totally upend your life? That was just way too scary. And like, I'm not going to think about it today. I'll think about it tomorrow. And, you know, tomorrow never comes because you say that every day.
So you got to this point, and it doesn't sound to me like we're at the part of your journey where you were anywhere near wanting to change.
No.
But these days where you are right now, remember, now we're going to jump around just a tiny bit, but if you could go back to like 12-year-old Bree and give her one piece of advice, what would you say to her?
Okay, I've gotten this question before, and it's hard because on one hand, I want to say so many things. I want to tell her, you're going to get funding to go to college, and, you know, don't screw this up. This is going to affect the rest of your life. I want to tell her, you know, God loves you. You're a beautiful creature and you're amazing. But then on the other hand, if I'm honest with you, I don't know that I would want to say any of those things because as painful as my journey has been to get where I am, and not through the pornography, that is what it is. And it's hard to look back on that. But other things that we'll get to that were painful. If I had changed in any way, then I wouldn't have met my husband. If I had finished college, I wouldn't have met my husband. If I had, you know, been Catholic, then I wouldn't have been, you know, at the bar dancing where my husband first noticed me. And I wouldn't be here today talking to you.
Sure.
So if I'm honest, I don't know that I would really want to change anything.
I think that's interesting because we can look back and we can regret certain parts of our story, but we can also be thankful for where God has worked in that.
Precisely.
And sometimes I think it can be helpful to think to ourselves. The reason why I like to ask that question and why I ask it of myself a lot is because I will oftentimes say, if 70-year-old Keith could tell 50-year-old Keith something, what do I think it would be? Because hindsight is always 20/20. And when you've walked through some heavy stuff, though, you realize that it's made you stronger. It's made you where you are. But I always also think too, okay, there were a few things I probably would have told myself to avoid. But let's talk a little bit about where your husband comes into the midst of this experience. So you met him, was it after college, in the middle of starting all this, or like what? Where was that? When did that come into play?
So it was during like maybe year 3 of my 1 year off.
Okay.
And yeah, he and I were very similar creatures where we were both very liberal. We were both very open with our sexuality. Very, by that I mean like slept around a lot, really into partying. And we met in Alaska, and then eventually I moved to the East Coast to be with him. And then, true to form, as any liberal type couple in their 20s, like we lived together for over 10 years before we got married, because we were like, we don't want anything to change. We don't need a marriage certificate. We don't need this. We don't need that. And then we both grew up, quite a bit within our relationship. And that to me was certainly a blessing. And he was raised Catholic, but just like me in college, he fell away from his faith, fell away from the church. And then during the period of my life where I was completely anti-God, had just so happened to be the period of his life that he came back into the church. And I wasn't ready for that at all. I didn't want to hear anything that he had to say.
Wow, we're going to get there, because that's a fascinating part of your story for sure. But let's talk a little bit about how what you were doing like affected your relationships with other people. If you were the bratty princess, how did the people around you handle that, and did it matter?
It didn't take me long at all to become very selective who I told about my work. And I made the mistake early on of telling 2 of my closest friends, who then one of them at least explained to me that she didn't like what I was doing. And then of course I was totally offended by that. And like, well, that's her problem. And like, good that she doesn't like that, and she showed her true colors, because I don't want to be friends with somebody like that. And then another one of my really good friends just stopped talking to me. And that really hurt. And I didn't understand why. And since then, she's reached out to me actually just recently. And I have to admit that I'm still kind of leery about getting back in touch with her, because it still really hurts that she chose to just stop talking to me and like stop answering my phone calls.
Even when you're in the thick of narcissistic hedonism, right, you still have feelings.
Yeah, imagine that. But most people, didn't know what I did. And yeah, I think that's really important to note that I've always had kind of a tender heart. And on the outside, I was this bratty princess, and a lot of that affected decisions, especially like my view of money was totally skewed for a really long time. Like anybody who was making, who worked at an average job and made even like $50 an hour, I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, shame on you. You're pathetic. I pushed certain people away, and then I learned quickly, don't tell them what you do for a living. But still, I still did treat people as though I was the center of attention. And I think that woman who recruited me was right in many ways, because I was raised, from the single parent, only child household. The center of attention was me. It was always me. And I took that to the extreme, though.
Were you happy?
No. I thought I was. Yeah. I I have, like multiple pairs of Louboutins. You probably don't even know what those are, which is fine.
That is.
Good for you. I had all designer clothes. I went on lavish vacations. And not just that, like when my dog got sick, we were able to pay for everything. We were without question. There was no concern of money whatsoever. And we got her the best care possible. And so I thought I was happy, but yeah. And I also thought, okay, well, nobody's life is perfect. Nobody goes through life just ecstatic and happy all the time. And I still believe that to an extent. But for me, looking back on it, like I cried all the time. I was so quick to snap and to become, and like so irritable, where like the littlest thing that somebody said, I would just bite their head off. Like, it's almost a shame that I deleted all of my Twitter, because you could have seen like some great examples of that. Not only did I bite people's head off, like at just a snap, just an impulse, but I relished in it. I loved the opportunity. Come on, tell me what you have to say, because I will tear you apart.
That's so fascinating that you say that, because of what you deal with now, which we'll talk about that too. Someone that has all of that going on from a worldly perspective, money, the center of attention, all of that. And you were even married. So you can't be like, oh, I was this lonely person sitting in my basement. No, you had a husband, but yet you were still crying yourself to sleep at night or whatever. And you were irritable. People that are filled with joy don't act like that.
No, not whatsoever. I compare who I was and how my life was then to how it is now, and it's night and day. I mean, I'm still of the opinion that nobody's life is perfect, and that's part of it. You can't have joy without sadness. You can't go through like Easter without Good Friday. And I guess you could, but it's not nearly as sweet. Like, nothing tastes as good as the iced tea that I had at the top, after I climbed out from the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And I don't even like iced tea. But that was the best beverage I've ever had in my life. And it was because of the struggle and the reward of that, because I had just hiked out through the Grand Canyon. So nothing's going to be absolutely perfect. And I'm not saying that my life is anywhere near perfect now, but just as a concrete example, I've been to see a therapist for many, many years, and it was once a week for a long time, and then I actually increased to 2 times a week for a while, and now I only go see my therapist maybe once a month, sometimes only once every 2 months, and I know that has everything to do with God.
The bottom of the Grand Canyon to the top, that's a long way. And I want to get to that part of your story of the climb out, because I think that's a really interesting way to talk about that. I've been to the Grand Canyon, and when you look at the bottom, it's from the top, you think there's a long way down there. I would hate to have to climb up, but you were down there, and it was hard. But tell us a little bit about, you mentioned this time when you became like super anti-God.
So about 3 years ago, the greatest tragedy that I could ever imagine occurred. And I think back on this, and it's made me stronger. It was, the beginning of my journey. And, I mentioned before, like, I wouldn't change a thing. And yet I'm still 3 years later and into Catholicism. I'm still wrestling with that. And like, I wish God would have chosen a different way, because it still is really painful. And I don't like to talk about it, but it was an extraordinary tragedy. And that evening, I remember falling down on my knees and just praying as hard as I could. I still remember my knuckles being white from how hard I was gripping my fingers together. And I thought, please, God, please don't do this to me. Please make it okay. And please don't do this. Please don't. And he did. And he didn't take it away. He didn't make it okay. And the next morning, and that night actually, the only way that I was able to fall asleep is, it's true, like fight or flight. And my flight was, I just have to kill myself now. There's no other way that I could go on with my life now that this has happened. There's nothing I can possibly do and other than kill myself. And I think, anybody who knew me would know that really messed me up. And my husband knows me better than anyone, and he didn't let me out of his sight for, I think it was 2 weeks. He made me go everywhere with him if he had to go somewhere. This was during COVID, so fortunately he was home, working from home. But that's, I think, probably like one of the only reasons why I didn't kill myself. Another one was, it's weird because even though I turned my back on God, I still thought to myself, well, if you kill yourself, then you can't get into heaven and you'll never be able to see her again, my tragedy. And so it's weird because at the same time, like I felt like pulling a Dracula, where he's crushed by this thing that happens to his wife. So he curses the church, like stabs the crucifix, and that's how he becomes Dracula. And that's where I was at. And yet at the same time, I was like, okay, well, I can't kill myself because then I won't be able to get into heaven. And that will absolutely crush my husband. But that night, I was able to fall asleep thinking, okay, now I just have to kill myself. That's all there is to it because of what God did. And it was just kind of a freak accident. And so I couldn't blame anybody except for God because I thought, he did this to me. He allowed this to happen. And people suggest, my mother, my husband, all sorts of people suggested, well, why don't you pray about this? That's the last thing I want to do. I can't even imagine talking to God. And every time I tried to, all that went through my head was, why? Why did you do this? And why'd you do this to me? Not that I'm some holy saint or anything like that, but you knew how this would affect me. And you did it anyway. So F you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And for about 3 years, like I couldn't, and this is coincidentally when my husband is finding the Catholic Church again. And he's like, hey, I'm going to church. Why? Why would you go to church right now? And I felt almost like it was a betrayal to me. And I remember one Christmas, I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to, Christmas service with you. I cried hysterically the whole time to the point where I couldn't go anywhere without I actually qualified at the time for medicinal marijuana, and because I was hysterical, and I just needed something to be able to help me get through the day. And, that's another thing that's filling that God-sized hole. And so here I am, and now my husband takes me to a Catholic mass, and I'm like, whatever. It's Christmas. I guess I'll go. And I'm sitting there just crying hysterically to the point where I have to go to the bathroom and smoke weed just in order to get through this mass because I'm in a house of God and I am so mad at him and I can't stop hysterically crying. Imagine that. Imagine being in a bathroom. There's other women in there and I'm just like, I don't care. There's other Catholic women in there. Well, Catholic women in there. And I'm like, I don't care. This is what I need. And I'm just like, smoking in the bathroom. I look back at that and like, that was desperation at that point. Like, and that's what I had to do just to be able to get through the service because it affected me so greatly just to be in a house of God that I couldn't stop crying.
I think that when people go through tragedies, it either has the effect of driving them right to the foot of the cross, right to Jesus, or it has the effect of driving them farther away. But with your story, I think I'm learning a third thing that it can do. It can be that thing that puts them in such a desperate state where they are made aware of just how bad things have become.
Yeah.
And in essence, we need to be in that place at some point in time in our lives in order to have the opportunity to climb out of that Grand Canyon.
Right.
Because if we don't realize we're at the bottom, then what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to keep trying to dig further and further and further
Mm-hmm.
until we're done.
Mm-hmm.
So your husband now is rediscovering his faith. I bet you just thought he was crazy.
Yep. And annoying. My gosh. Like,
There's nothing crazier than a reconverted Catholic,
Yeah.
right? To a non-Catholic person
Uh-huh.
who's mad at God
Mhm.
and is narcissistic and
Mhm.
doesn't want anything to do with
Right?
it. You must have thought he had lost his mind.
yes. And it was almost offensive to me because, well, not only because of my Protestant upbringing, and I learned all throughout my life as a Lutheran that we hate Catholics. Like, that's the basis of our relationship, is that we're anti-Catholic. And not only that, but yeah, now he's like listening to all these podcasts and watching all these YouTube, like you. And I just can't handle it. Like, I go into the living room and and again, it's during COVID, so he's home all the time, and it's always like Catholic this and Bible this, and I just don't want to hear it. I think almost I turn away even more because he's so into it, and I see him growing. I see his faith growing, and I see him changing. Instead of watching, secular TV, he's listening to the Bible in a year, and like he's buying all these books, and he wants to get these like Marian tattoos, and they're beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Whatever, just don't drag me along with you. And I see him benefiting from this, and it's something that I'm just kind of now realizing that was also a part of it, is that I was kind of mad because he was benefiting from somebody who I thought turned his back on me.
Did you feel like you were being left behind a little bit, or that you were being sort of abandoned?
If I did, it was more like, good. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with where you're going. More like, it wasn't so much I was abandoned as it was that I thought maybe it was kind of like I was forgotten. And I know that sounds similar, but
That's exactly what I was trying to ask.
Yeah.
Like, because I can imagine you and him were sort of like partners in crime to a certain degree, way of speaking.
Yes.
You were both on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's gone out of the Grand Canyon.
Right.
He's standing on the top, and you're down there like, what happened?
And he keeps shouting advice, but all of his advice is God related. So that just makes me even more mad. And like, turn it over to God. Equate your suffering with Jesus on the cross. What does that even mean? What does that mean? I'm still trying to figure out what that means in all actuality.
No, I understand. I understand completely. Wow. So I'm trying to like imagine what it was like for him to try to think to himself, how do I help
poor
her?
guy.
How do I minister to her? And because I'm sure when this happened with him, he had to recognize the pain that you were in, probably bigger than you did from a bigger perspective, because you were seeing your pain confined to this tragedy, and he was probably seeing that that's just the icing on the cake.
Yep.
Definitely. Really, because there's a lot more beneath the surface here. When we come into those painful experiences, sometimes we don't want to face the stuff that's underneath, so we just point all of our rage and all of our angst at that one particular thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, that you couldn't blame anybody else but God. So he gets that wrath. It's all going right there.
Yep.
And now your husband is like, oh, isn't God the greatest thing ever?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yep. But I saw how it was benefiting him, so I didn't really want to take that away from him, but I didn't want to be a part of it at all. And I did kind of take it personally.
What opened the door to you having a change of heart with all of this?
A lot of people think my story is, I found God and then I stopped porn. But it's not a Disney princess story, and it's not that simple. And really, like, quitting porn was just the fruit of what happened. Last spring, or like a year ago spring, we were given the opportunity to go to Rome. And both my husband and I are avid travelers, and we both strongly feel like the more research that you do, the greater you can appreciate a place. So we do a bunch of research, and he wants to go to all these churches. We probably went to, I don't know, over 100 churches. And something that I discovered within my research is that's perfectly fine, because within, Western civilization, the greatest artwork in the world is found in Rome, and the greatest artwork in the world in Rome are found in churches and basilicas. So, I'm not thinking of it as entering into a house of God. I'm thinking of it as like a cool, like open air free museum, or, like somewhere where I can appreciate Michelangelo and Caravaggio, and I'm never going to get that opportunity again. And so, yeah, let's do it. Let's go to all these churches and all these basilicas, and I never really considered what kind of implications there would be, or or even, and it I think because it was so foreign to me, literally, like being in another country, that it wasn't that Christmas Eve service where I'm smoking weed in the bathroom. It was more like, this is beautiful and this is wonderful. And so I was really excited to do this, and completely gung-ho. And I never considered that it was, God's house, initially, at least prior to going there. So we get there, and the first thing I notice, okay, remember I'm coming from a Lutheran background. The first thing I notice in these churches and these basilicas is the crucifix is always like smack dab right there in your face. Jesus' greatest gift to us. And I still don't have these feelings of anger and these feelings of sadness. It's just like my breath is taken away, like how beautiful it is. But it's still just artwork initially. Then, as I'm appreciating these paintings, I decide that, kind of like literally, when in Rome, you do what the Romans do. So I thought, it'd be kind of fun to wear a veil in these churches. So I did that. And to acknowledge Jesus on the cross. So I started genuflecting, not so much just like to be as the Romans are, or not so much like as a penitent or even someone who had forgiven God, but more just like it was my way of saying hello. And so I started crossing myself. Initially, I think it was actually, now that I'm thinking about this, it was just because like that's what you do when you go into a Catholic church.
You know what it sounds to me like? It sounds like you were doing what you did before. You were playing the part.
Yeah. Okay.
You were you were playing dress up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
Definitely.
had become like, ooh, I like to do stuff like that. This is new and exciting, and I want to do it.
Yeah. Like I had the opportunity to go to Australia when I was younger, and I was actually a vegetarian at the time, but the people there were serving kangaroo. And when else am I going to get an opportunity to eat kangaroo? All the other vegetarians in the trip like totally shunned me for the rest of the trip, but I was eating it because like when else are you going to do that? So yeah, when you're in Australia, you eat kangaroo. When you're in Rome, you genuflect. And I guess, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. But in a way, I was like kind of ashamed to say that to you. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I was playing the part. I wasn't in any way like praying or anything like that. There wasn't any more of a religious element to it other than I thought it was my way of saying hello to the crucifix. And then I'd say goodbye to the crucifix before I left. But then something really started to change, and I started seeing this artwork, and like I remember it specifically in front of a Caravaggio painting. I started seeing the artwork, and it was the fall of Damascus. The road to Damascus. From Damascus, one of those. And it's just this incredible artwork, but you see Paul/Saul's pain on his face, and I admit that I wasn't really sure what was going on in this painting, and I knew the story kind of, but I asked my husband like to explain it more, and after that moment things started to change a little bit, and I started to see and appreciate the artwork for the theology and the meaning behind it, rather than just like wow, his use of light and dark contrast is really incredible. But more it was, wow, he really paints and portrays that pain and that insecurity really well. And then, I started thinking about, why was Paul slash Saul in pain and insecure? And then, kind of like a little bit of like, well, how does that relate to life, like my life? But more significant than that, I I remember, especially in Sorrento and along the Amalfi Coast, we went into smaller churches, and I remember, and that was the very beginning of our trip. And um, I remember going into these churches, and there was always Mary somewhere. She wasn't on display like the crucifix or, right in the middle of the church, like the tabernacle. She was usually off to the side somewhere in like some alcove or something like that, which made it even more special because it was kind of like I would seek her out and like, okay, where's Mary in this church? And then I started seeing her everywhere. And in Italy, they have a great devotion to Mary, and they have, frescoes and paintings of her just even on the wall of a building or something, just randomly. They're called edicolas, and it became like this game of like, how many edicolas can we see today? And I remember even in the cafe that we frequented, the barista had a bracelet with Mary on it. And I was like, this woman is everywhere. Is she stalking me or something like that? And so I kind of started stalking her back, where I would go into to these churches and, appreciate the artwork, do my genuflecting, and then where's Mary? So I'd go and I'd seek her out. I'd find her. And like I said, she was usually in like a side alcove. So it wasn't like, a lot of people around. It was just her and I. And I started talking to her. Initially I knelt in front of her because I thought maybe that's what you were supposed to do because there's a kneeler there. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't in prayer, and it wasn't even asking for her intercession. It was asking for intercession, actually, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And initially, I just kind of introduced myself, like, parle inglese, and, do you speak English? Like, my name's Bree, and, I've seen you everywhere, and I know who you are, but you probably don't know who I am. And then it became more than that. And it was, I started talking to her about my tragedy, because I thought of her as, she was a human, she was a mother, and she went through probably the greatest tragedy of our, like, humankind. And she not only went through it, but she went through it with grace and beauty and dignity and forgiveness. There was no malice whatsoever. She just knew that this had to happen. And it's not like she was okay with it. There was crying, there was sorrow, but she accepted it. And I thought, even at that point, I was still so mad at God, but I could talk to Mary. I could ask her, maybe you could help me with what's going on in my life. And from there, things progressed a little bit more. It gets even better if you can imagine it. From there, we spent a few days in Assisi, and I knew, like, we planned on traveling to Assisi early on, not for any kind of pilgrimage, but because we're both, like, my husband and I are both really into the environment and animals, and even as a non-Catholic, I knew who Saint Francis was. We had a statue of him in our garden, and I refer to him kind of like the gateway saint because, even people who aren't Catholic, they know who he is if they're into like gardening or something like that. So we wanted to learn more about him, discover like where he came from, go and see the place that he died. In our research on St. Francis, I learned about St. Clare. And I really think Assisi should like adopt the slogan of come for St. Francis, but stay for St. Clare, because she is just like an underappreciated woman. So many people think of her as like St. Francis's sidekick. And the beauty of it is that she wouldn't care at all if that's what you think of her.
You could call me that any day of the week.
Yeah. But and that's what I thought of her too when I initially went to Assisi. I learned all about St. Francis in my research, and in doing so, I learned a little bit about St. Clare, but not a whole lot. I knew she came from a wealthy family, and she was really into hair shirts. She was really into fasting, and was sick all the time because of it. What a weirdo.
A hair shirt, just so people who don't know, that's a shirt that was like made out of hair, so it would physically be uncomfortable.
Horsehair, yeah.
As a penance, as a way to sort of suffer on purpose.
Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off.
No.
I know someone's probably in the comments going,
right.
What is a hair shirt?
Thanks. Yeah, I forget about these things. So I assume that everybody knows at least 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 200 times as much about Catholicism as I do. So that's a good point, that a lot of people probably don't know what that means. So that's all that I really knew about her. But I definitely wanted to see her tomb because, when in Assisi, you're going to do everything. And not only was she, a part of St. Francis's life, but she's one of the saints whose body is incorruptible. So that's just pretty cool. And it's in a glass case. She's covered in wax. It's absolutely gorgeous. So you go down, for those of you who don't know, you go down to her tomb. You have to travel, downstairs. You're standing in line for a while. There are kneelers, or you can choose to actually kneel in front of her tomb. And again, I was going to take this opportunity. Although it's weird, now that I think about it, there are certain times when I did have an opportunity to kneel in front of someone's tomb, and I chose not to because, I'm not Catholic. I don't want to take up time because there's a line.
Yeah.
And I think it was Saint Cecilia I chose not to. I hadn't thought about that until just now, but for some reason I wanted to. That's weird. Okay.
When I was first getting into Catholicism, and especially with the saint stuff, I remember we went to a relic trip. Father Carlos Martins was coming through with the relics, and he took us down to see the relics, and he said, you will feel drawn to some saints and not others. And I remember thinking that sounded so strange, but I really did begin to feel like that in certain times in my life where certain saints just seemed to have this fascination that I would have with them. So that kind of rings true with that. You were drawn to Claire.
Yeah.
But you knew nothing about her, really.
No. And also on the way down to her tomb, you can see her hair shirts. There is one that is still on display there. So all of this, I'm kind of, setting the table, if you will, as to what my mindset was and how I imagined her to be. So, I go for it. I stand in line. I kneel in front of her tomb. And I'm also the type of person, even though I'm pretty narcissistic, I'm also I'm really cognizant of others around me. And so if there's a line, I need to be quick. But it's weird now thinking about it. I didn't have thoughts of that at all. So I kneel at her tomb and I close my eyes and, I've said this many times that I'm not a mystic. I'm not really sure what happened, although I am sure. I just need to own it that I saw her. I closed my eyes and she appeared to me. And she was wearing this golden dress off-white dress with golden threads running through it. There was a really bright light that was almost obscuring most of her face. I remember thinking back, it looked like something that she would have rented from David's Bridal, like a bridesmaid's dress. And that's kind of significant, I think, looking back on it. But at the time, I just closed my eyes and she appeared and she said to me, "Look at my lap. Look at how soft and sturdy my lap is. look at my forearms and look at how soft my forearms are. And you can put her here, meaning my tragedy. You can put her here. You don't have to carry this all yourself. And she'll be safe with me, and I'll take care of her. And I just started weeping, and I didn't know what to make of it. But I really believed her, and I still believe her, that she's taking care of everything that I was holding on to so tightly. And she was able to take it from me to an extent, and I'm still struggling, but she's able to help me. And she told me, you don't have to carry all of this on your shoulders. And since then, I've really examined like what she's wearing, what she said, like, is this all in your head? Did you just make this up? Are you trying to make yourself feel better? And I don't think I am, because all I knew about her was she liked hair shirts and poverty. And so why wouldn't she have appeared to me in her hair shirt? And why would she say all these weird things about how soft her forearms are? That's kind of creepy, right? And yet it was so powerful to me. But at the time, yeah, I didn't even think, well, that was kind of weird. I just remember getting up and in my mind saying, thank you so much. And then we had to go up the stairs and meet our tour guide. So, Bree, get it together. We're going to lunch now. And it wasn't until like later that night that I really started thinking about it again. And every time I think about it, I get teared up because it just meant so much to me. And I know now that like the significance of the bridesmaid's dress is, she's in heaven, she's a saint, and Jesus is the bridegroom. And the significance of you no longer have to hold this on your shoulders, give it to me so that I can give it to God. I know the significance of what she knew what I needed to hear, because she's actually really well known for that. I've done a lot of research about her after that. And she's well known for recruiting people into the Catholic Church and recruiting people, to choose her as as their confirmation saint. And that's what she did with me. And I'm just so blessed. I feel like both of these amazing women brought me back to God. Needless to say, after that, things started changing. So we get back from Assisi, or from Italy, and I equate it to, what I imagine a pilgrimage is like. And you get home from a pilgrimage and you had all these amazing, wonderful experiences, and you felt so close to God, and your relationship with Jesus and Mary and all these saints has grown exponentially. And now you're home and you're back at your daily grind, and what are you going to do? So I decide to start going to Mass. Like these feelings, these changes didn't happen in a Lutheran church. They happened in a Catholic church. And I wanted that beauty, and I wanted the smell of the incense and all of that I experienced in Italy. And I admit initially it was, for no other reason than just to rekindle those feelings that I had. I started going to Mass, and it wasn't regularly, but my husband was going regularly. So maybe like every other week I would go with him.
Now, had you told him about this experience yet with St. Clair?
No, I hadn't told anyone, because I thought that it was either like something just like that. It wasn't really on the forefront of my mind. And especially back into the daily grind, like back into all these reminders of who I am at this point and how miserable I am, and hating God wasn't part of the equation anymore. But I also, I wasn't jumping into a life of like a monastic or anything like that. But I'm not, at this point ready to give up my career to become Catholic, none of that.
So you came back, and from his perspective, it just looked like, okay, Bree's willing to come to mass with me once in a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But you hadn't said to him, hey, I had this mystical experience and now I'm like in a different place.
No, not at all.
Not quite ready for that yet.
Yeah. Because I'm still also considering the fact that this is all just in my head, that I made up this experience to help me feel better. I now know that that's definitely not the case. But even just going to mass, it started with every other week, and then became kind of a regular thing. Pretty much I went, every week, and sitting there in among that setting and hearing quite a few homilies about, how pornography was one of the greatest evils of the world. Like, it started to take effect, and it wasn't a wham, bam, I'm done. It was more just kind of like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Because I knew that, churches aren't supporting pornography, and lots of people think that pornography is one of the greatest evils and all of that. And I was just like, whatever, I can sin as much as I want to, as long as I have Jesus and accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior in my heart. I'm still clinging to all of that. But things are starting to sink in. And, during certain homilies, I'm just like, this is really awkward. They're totally talking about me, and God knows that they're talking about me, and I know that they're talking about me. But, I still wasn't completely, totally on board. And a lot of it is, in a way similar to your story. Like, what am I going to do if how am I going to make a living?
This is who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And unlike you, who's going to hire me? Because, like, what could I even put on my resume that I've been doing for the last 10 years?
Oh, I thought that too. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So, I think that a lot of things I came up with, well, that's just going to lead to even more questions. And I just want to pretend like the last 10 years didn't exist if I'm going to try to get another job. And let's forget about even making as much money as I used to. Just like, how am I even going to work? What kind of a job could I have? Like, am I even able to function in a normal society? And so that was, I'm going to say, kind of troubling. But at the same time, like, I really started to feel ugly and dirty, and I didn't like who I was, and I didn't like editing videos. I didn't even like looking at myself. Like, I stopped producing, like, actually making videos, but I would still just like upload old content. And looking at who I was in those videos, and even in the photos, like, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But I still wasn't ready to jump into Catholicism. I mean, imagine, like, the whole background of, like, the Lutheran background, and then this tragedy, and those things stick with you. The Protestant, the feelings of, Catholics are bad and evil. And so I decide I need to hear it from some sort of authority, because my husband's, he's a very intelligent man, but he loves me. So he's going to say whatever he thinks will make me, feel better. And I don't trust that he knows exactly what's best for me at this point. And yeah, he said a lot of things, that were deemed to be helpful, but also I didn't think of him as a Catholic authority. So I wanted to go to an actual Catholic authority. And so I made an appointment with and spoke with a priest. And he didn't ask me about my background. He didn't even ask me actually if I wanted to be Catholic or any of the questions that you would expect. He asked me, how's your faith? And just like, I open my mouth and like word vomit all over his desk. I'm like crying hysterically, telling him about my tragedy, telling him about Italy. And and he says just like profound, amazing things. But the two things that he said to me that changed everything forever, and I will always hold dear in my heart, where he said, God loves you and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. And that was tremendous. And it's weird because it's not like I forgot that God didn't love me, but it was like I I couldn't believe that God loved me and he let this tragedy happen. If he had said, God loves you and he wants you to be happy, it wouldn't have made as much of an impact as the way that he said, God loves you and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. That to me was just a tremendous thing to hear. And anybody else in the whole world could have told me that. And I think people did. My husband, my mom, you could have like called me and I would have been like, who are you? Like, why are you calling me? And you could have told me that. Anybody could have said that. And it wouldn't have had the same impact as like somebody I thought of as a Catholic authority. And that's really when everything changed. I remember like when I first sat down, when I first went there to meet with him, it was, under the guise of, well, I'm thinking about joining RCIA. And I got there early because I was really nervous and I wasn't sure how this conversation was going to go. And I wasn't sure like if he was just going to be super judgmental. And, and so I talked with his secretary for a few minutes beforehand. And just within those 5 minutes, like I told her about like all the bad things that had happened. And she was so warm and friendly and welcoming. And just within those 5 minutes of waiting for him to come to his office, she told me about how her son had committed suicide. And I thought, oh my gosh. And here you are still not only believing in God and being Catholic and going to mass, but you're a priest secretary? Like, how? And she embraced me and we cried. And I thought to myself, like, I want what she has. Like, she is happy and she is welcoming and she is friendly despite of what happened to her, despite of her greatest tragedy. So after the meeting with the priest, I'm still crying and we walk out and he says, oh, have you met my secretary? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're good friends. And he's like, she's the instructor of RCIA. And I was like, bam, I'm in. Definitely. Wow. Sign me up.
Okay. One of the things that I think about in those moments like that, just how important it is to be kind and loving to everybody that you meet, because you never know where they are. Mm-hmm. And if she would have been short or inhospitable to you in some way, that could have changed everything.
Right.
If that priest would have said, I don't have time for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could have changed everything for you.
Mm-hmm.
But
definitely.
Their kindness opened the door to be the vessel for what you needed in order to do this. So was that it? You like sign me up for RCIA? You go home and you're like, guess what I'm doing?
No, I texted my husband from the parking lot because I was just overjoyed. I was so excited. There was never, ever a thought in my head that he was going to throw it back to me and be like, I told you, you should have done this months ago. Never. No, I was so excited. I was overjoyed. And that's when I was like, okay, well, you really can't have it both ways. You've committed to becoming Catholic. You're going to RCIA. You have to stop doing pornography. And I think actually I stopped before I joined RCIA. It's all kind of blurry still, the timeline. But I remember, at some point being like, all right, well, if you're going to become Catholic, you can't do porn anymore. That's all there is to it. And then, once that connection with the priest and my friend, my instructor, RCIA instructor happened, just everything changed. And at some point along the line, I decided that, I needed to quit pornography because and it might have even been when I was sitting in Mass and just becoming uncomfortable, and and then looking at myself, and I truly felt physically ugly and disgusting. And then I was like, yeah, you can't do this anymore. You can't have it both ways. You can't be playing both games. You have to have one or the other. And it's time to give this up. So, January of this year, January 1st, I closed down all of my pornography sites and stores and OnlyFans and all of that. And I made an announcement on Twitter saying, this is what I'm doing. I had this incredible experience in Italy, and now I'm quitting porn and I'm becoming Catholic. And certainly, this was not the norm. Like when women retire from pornography, they usually kind of just drift away silently, or they make a big announcement that they're retiring, and then they usually don't retire. It's like this whole game. But nobody sticks around afterwards. But I felt like I owed it to the ones who saved me. It wasn't just all of a sudden I realized porn was bad, and so I needed to quit and become Catholic. I was recruited by St. Clair, by our Blessed Virgin Mary, like by our Blessed Mother, by Jesus. He never gave up on me. And I owed it to all of them to say what had happened, and to say, this is the change that I'm making in my life because of these just amazing experiences and these incredible role models. And I want to be like them. I want that.
You had to imagine all of the people that were following you to that point were following you because of what you were doing.
Right.
Were you worried about their reaction, or did you were just like, I just want to shout this from the rooftops?
I just want to shout it from the rooftops. Yeah, I completely changed. I'm now the type of person who I answer to a higher power. Like the only one whose opinion matters is God, Jesus. And I mean, I value my husband's opinion. I'm not going to say I don't, but that's who I'm living for now, is God. And I am his and he is mine. And there's nothing else.
Let's talk about your RCIA journey.
Mm-hmm.
So from lots of people join RCIA for lots of different reasons. Some are there just because they're getting married to somebody and they're making them go through a class. Some people are exploring Catholicism because they're just maybe intrigued by some of the theology. Mm-hmm. You're there because you had a vision of a saint who pulled you out of this horrible experience that you were in for the last 10 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of, did you feel like a fish out of water, or were you just so excited to be there that it didn't matter what was happening around you?
No, I was just so excited to be there. And I didn't feel like an oddity.
Did people accept you? Or they just like, oh, that's cool. Let's do this.
I never told anybody in RCIA what I did. I told them about how, I was Lutheran, and actually, I don't even know if anybody asked like why I was there. I mean, I guess if they had, it would just be because I want to be Catholic. Like
that's all. That's all you need. Yeah. Here's the thing that's so true. It doesn't matter, does it? Mm-hmm. Because we all come from, and this is by the way, this is the big secret of the interview. We're all at the bottom of the Grand Canyon at one point in our life.
Yep.
And to pull us to the top, that's the work of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And you might, out there watching this, might not have a story of the kind of things that Bree's walked through, but you've got your own story of brokenness, and God wants to bring you up. And one of the things I love about the Catholic faith, and I want you to speak to this too, is that it's full of all kinds of people that are all on the same journey.
Yep, certainly. And it's not even that like you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon at one point or another in your life. Like sometimes I feel I'm at the bottom of the Grand Canyon at one point or another in my day, like it can, like the world can be overpowering, and self-doubt, self-contempt. Those are still things that run pretty deep in all of us. From the very first fall of Adam and Eve. That's who we are. That's how we're created. And I think that, for some of us, it's easier to talk poorly about ourselves or to think poorly about ourselves. And I'm certainly one of those people. And not necessarily because of my recent past, but also even just like the way that I was raised. I didn't have a father, and I'm kind of second guessing things, and I never finished college. Everybody has those experiences and those aspects of their life that they're not proud of, that in dark moments they're easy to pull them back down, all the way down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
When you were doing this process of RCIA, what were some things that were helpful to you in that process that other people did?
It sounds like I'm shamelessly brown-nosing, but unpacking the Mass, it was a huge thing for me.
I'm so thankful for that.
It was, I can remember exactly at what point one of our instructors, or I think maybe it was even in the workbook that we were filling out, like there would be questions asked of you of like, how are you going to change in order to, and this week it was like, what are you going to do to understand the Mass better? And so it was my husband again who suggested that I listen to your podcast. And I was like, okay, I'll listen to it on 2 times the speed in the shower, before Mass. And kind of begrudgingly initially. And then there was something that you said about the rainbow that really spoke to me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go down to 1.25 speed.
I talk pretty fast. That must have been really hard to understand.
Yeah. And now I listen to it at normal speed and not in the shower. And I usually listen to it like days before the Mass. So even like the evolution of listening to you is kind of an interesting story. But yeah, there were so many things that I was still resistant to, even though I had decided to become Catholic.
Yeah, like what?
Okay, like a lot of those Protestant prejudices came up, and almost like out of nowhere. I was doing a consecration. I was doing the 30-day consecration to Mary, and because someone had brought it up and suggested it and said, it was actually someone on Twitter who suggested it, who was like, this really helped me become closer to Our Lady. And I just thought this journey was incredible. And I had done like the 9-day novena of Lady Undoer of Knots. And I actually, it was right after we got back from Italy, and prior to going to RCIA, like maybe the week before or something like that. And I'm still struggling with my tragedy at this point. And I cried every single day, the whole time through it. And I couldn't even get myself to say, like, please undo these knots, because I felt like I wasn't deserving of that kind of mercy. And so I would say, please loosen my knots. And then, yeah, I did the consecration to Mary. And I remember at one point, there was something that was said in one of the prayers, and it was something like, the Blessed Virgin Mary exalted on high above anybody else. And I was like, what is this crap? And I threw the book, and I started crying in rage. And my husband was like, what is going on with you? Like, why don't you take a shower? like have some water, calm down. And then I messaged my friend on Twitter, and I was like, who had suggested that I do this. And I was like, I'm really struggling. I'm having a hard time with this one passage, and I don't even know where it's coming from, and I don't know what's going on with me. I can't stop crying. I've been in the shower for 45 minutes now, and I'm still crying. And he was like, all right, you need to calm down and realize that this is very, very possibly Satan at play. Like, think of how mad he is that he lost you. Think of how close he was to to just claiming your soul for all eternity. That still scares me, just the idea of that. And that snapped me out of my crying state, like, instantaneously, because like that horrifies me. The idea of being so broken and so narcissistic and so deep in sin that Satan is gleeful and he knows that he has me and he doesn't even have to work anymore and work at it, And now that I decided to stop doing these other things, I've become, I've enrolled to become Catholic, and now I'm consecrating myself to the Virgin Mary. He's freaking out, and he's going to do anything that he can, like within his power, to convert me back to his side. And that made a lot of sense to me, and it scared me. And I thought, all right, I'm getting back down on my knees right here and now. Like, I got out of the shower. I didn't even get dressed. I just put on a towel and finished my prayers. Because, I'm not saying that's the best way to go about things, but sometimes fear is a great motivator.
I do talk to people often who they decide they want to become Catholic, and when they get in the middle of it, or the middle of the process, stuff starts to happen to them, and there's all these exit ramps that become right there. Like, you can't do this. This person's going to leave you. You're not going to be able to find a job, whatever. All these things that's going to cost you to actually become Catholic. And one of the things I tell people is I want you to imagine the absolute worst case scenario of what could happen to you if you become Catholic and decide that you're okay with that if you get to become Catholic.
Yeah.
So that the devil has this could happen.
No,
you already accept it. You say, okay,
Yep.
if I lose everything in this life, but I gain the Eucharist, I gain being in Christ's church, whatever it costs me is worth it. Now, what does that sound like to you? That's Jesus. That's the way of discipleship. That isn't even Catholicism. That's just, I mean, it is Catholicism, but that's what so many people just think, who aren't Catholic, think of just discipleship. Right. But it's amazing to me how converts like you and me, we truly experience that when we become Catholic.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing the whole personal relationship with Jesus my way, we don't have to give up a whole lot that we are aware of. We're giving up our soul. But if we follow that to its logical trajectory, but when you become Catholic, you truly have to sacrifice. So what does becoming Catholic cost you?
Nothing. No, nothing. I mean, I'm just gaining everything. Becoming Catholic is the best thing that's happened to me. I can't think of a single thing that I've lost that really matters.
Okay, there's the key. Because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's not true. But then it just hit me while you were saying that. There's things that you gave up, and then there's things that cost you. And what does St. Paul says about counting the cost? He says, I count it all as loss because I've gained the Father. You did lose a lot of things. You lost your money. You lost your ability to just do whatever you want, all of that. But because you love Jesus so much, you don't even count that as cost anymore.
No.
And that's what's so awesome about that. And I think that's the point, is you realize what you've gained. But if you stop and look at it, you go, no, that did cost me something, but what I've gained has been so great. So what was your biggest challenge in converting to Catholicism? Was there anything that made it tougher for you?
I was concerned about what I was going to do for work. I was concerned at where my income was going to come from. And I know that my situation is different than some people, because there is another source of income within our household. So it's not like I'm completely alone and destitute. But at the same time, like, a huge amount of income was coming from me and my job. And I just decided, that it wasn't as important as as not having Jesus, as being so unhappy, like all of those things, like having Jesus, having a relationship with God, knowing Saint Clare, like, knowing that our Blessed Mother loves me and, reached out to me. All of those things were and are a lot more important than the extremely lavish vacations, the exceedingly expensive shoes. But, being honest, like it'd be nice to go on even like a dinky vacation every now and then. It'd be nice to have, somewhat, nice shoes. They don't have to be extremely nice, but, maybe a little classy. And so that was a concern of like, and then what if one of my animals gets sick and I don't have that income? And, I had a lot of savings. So we lived off of that for a while. But really, that wasn't a huge concern for me because I just trusted in God, and I figured that and my husband and I, we could become those people who, eat ramen if we need to, because we're so much happier that it's fine that I don't have, like handmade from scratch, like lobster ravioli. I can eat ramen because I'm eating it with Jesus.
Amen. Okay, so you go through RCIA. What was it like for you? Because you came in on the Easter Vigil, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that moment like? Describe it when you finally got to that.
Yeah.
That first time when you can receive, because you received. You didn't just make your first communion. You did other, like, tell us about your other sacraments that were part of that.
So even the priest who I went to talk with that first moment, we started going to that parish, and he's been, very influential, and he said to me, "You're going to receive 4 sacraments in 3 days. Like, you're going to be so holy." And I was pumped. So yep. And then even the deacon was like, I think it just occurred to him at one point. He was like, "That's right. You got 4 sacraments." He was like 3 sacraments in 4 days, or in 3 days. And I was like, no, it was 4.
Okay.
And
So confession, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Okay. Thank you for asking, because I think so many people are fearful of confession and don't realize that it's the sacrament of, like, it's listed under the sacrament of healing. It's it's something that's there for you. It's not something that you have to do. And yes, of course, it can be scary. And my first confession was beautiful, hilarious, agonizing. I get there, again, I'm early because I'm super nervous. I tell Father Kevin that, no, I don't want it to be in the confessional. Like, I want it to be face-to-face in his office. His office is really where everything changed in the first place during that first conversation. And then I also felt like if it wasn't face-to-face, it would somehow be easier for me, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to be legit, and I now know that it's not about where you are, and it's not even that I'm talking to him. He's taking the place of God. But at the time, I was just like, this is what I need. This is what I need to go through. I need to put myself through this point. And I realized, like, he's not even looking at me. His eyes are closed the whole time. So it's not even like we're face to face, really. And I'm crying hysterically, and I have this long list, and so I'm not even looking up at him. So what's the point? But anyway, I felt like I needed to be face to face, and I get there early. There's a younger priest who's there in the office, like using the copy machine or something like that, and he hugs me, and he says, I'm sure you're nervous, but just remember that that as a priest, like, we've heard it all. There's nothing that you can say that we haven't heard. And I'm thinking, you want to bet? Like, I don't think Father Kevin's heard this one. And then Father Kevin comes in, and he makes this joke, and he he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous to hear this confession." And that really helped a lot to like ease myself.
He was being sarcastic.
Exactly. Yeah. He was, just kind of in a way mocking me a little bit, which is perfect. Exactly what I needed. But then that's where the chuckles ended. And I had this whole like 2-page list because I wanted to make sure that, I listed everything. And I know there's no way to list absolutely everything, but I took a long time, looking through that pamphlet and going through each one of the different categories. And there was a lot. There was a lot in my life that I had to ask forgiveness for. And I started with the least offensive and worked my way up. And even just like I opened the the list and I was like, I've lied and told falsehoods. I couldn't even make it out like the second word, and I was already crying. And then as after I finished, I was still crying, but my crying became less hysterical and less like I'm such an awful person, and more just like release. And this weight is just off me, and I feel drained, but in such a good way. And as he was talking, I was weeping, but in a way that it was cathartic. It was helpful. It was healing. And that's what I don't really understand with cradle Catholics or, with other people, that they seem to be really nervous or they seem to use like a lot of euphemisms, and like, I don't really understand that. Like, you're not going to get that reconciliation unless you put in all of what you want reconciliation for. You're not going to be able to reconcile with yourself or with God unless you really just put it all out there. And Father Kevin, it's not Father Kevin that I'm talking to. He retains none of this, and neither does God. And I mean, let's be honest, like, God knew what I was doing when I did it, and even before I did it. Like, Father Kevin explained that to me during the process of confession. And that to me is like, God knew I was going to do these things. So it's just, he's just given me this opportunity to admit it and to ask for forgiveness. And I think that's such a powerful sacrament and such a powerful tool that it seems to me a lot of people, really dread it, but it's one of my favorite parts about being Catholic. And I just, if you take one thing from this interview, just remember it's the sacrament of healing. It's there for you to help you heal. And after that, I was given my penance, and I went to the bathroom first, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and it was a weird sensation of like, I thought, you look really pretty. Wow, you're really beautiful. And I hadn't thought that in a long time. And it was weird, like that's just a weird thing to think. But like, my skin was glowing, my eyes were sparkling, and I was kind of taken aback at like how pretty I looked. And I think it's because I had just been reborn, basically. My skin was glowing, and I just felt like a newborn.
Wow.
And another thing I think is significant is I went to do my penance, and at that particular church, we have a lot of amazing, beautiful places. We have a 24-hour Eucharistic Adoration Chapel. We have really beautiful, like, the inside of our church is like, kind of nice. It's a little bit 80s, but and there are many different areas on the grounds of the church outside, like many different benches and things like that. there are plenty of really nice, comfortable places that I could have chosen to do my penance, but I chose to go outside and sit on the ground in the dirt next to like this little statue of Saint Francis. And this is even before like the flowers are in bloom. So it's a little bit chilly, but I knew that's exactly where I wanted to go. And I remember just kind of like digging into the dirt with my bum and like resting up against a tree. And I think the reason why I really wanted to be in this place exactly is because I felt so childlike. Because I wanted to sit in the grass and get dirty and pray my rosary and I just felt like a newborn and like a child in so many ways.
People sometimes talk about when you go to confession, you physically feel lighter and different. You took that to a whole other level.
Yeah.
And I think that's so amazing. It is a gift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whenever someone's like, why do you have to go to confession? I'm like, you're missing out.
Yeah.
It's not a have to, it's a get to. And it's such a healing thing.
It really is.
I can only imagine what that must have been like for you. Okay, so you got confession. And what was the second sacrament?
Reconvalidation. So
okay, so that for everybody that is understanding that, it's basically like your marriage is now being sacramentally blessed by the church. Or, for some people, they talk about like you got married in the church. Because your husband raised Catholic, but left the church.
We got married in Alaska.
Okay.
In the middle of the woods.
So this was like getting your marriage done in the church. And Stella and I, we did the same thing. So I can relate to that too. So what was that like?
Okay. So initially I was like, no, I don't want to do it right away. I want to wait until like our original wedding anniversary. So then we'll just have one anniversary all together. Father Kevin goes, I don't think that's a good idea. And I was like, I just trust this man like complicitly. So immediately, my husband says that he was really surprised because I can be pretty stubborn. But my immediate reaction is just like, okay, whatever you say. And he was like, let's get it done as soon as possible. So I wasn't really sure exactly like what would be like a romantic time to redo this, like what's a significant time? I'm looking at like the feast days coming up and nothing's really sticking with me. And that Thursday, Holy Thursday, happened to be the anniversary of my tragedy. And something just spoke to me, and it was almost like I could see the date in calligraphy written on my heart. And this is a day of tremendous pain. And it's all like, I dread it. The beginning of the month happens and I'm counting down the days. And I know that this whole day is going to be absolutely horrible. And I thought, this could be a way to change that. And this could be a way to try to move forward. And I mean, I'd already gotten a lot of ways to try to move forward, but this could really be a significant thing that, like, even the date itself, when I would see, even the month itself, when I would see like an expiration date, I'm like, ugh, I hate that month. But I thought something inside told me that like, this is what you should do. And it just so happened it was on Holy Thursday, and we asked Father Kevin, who's enormously busy, and, like, oh my gosh, that's going to be such an inconvenience. Like, we wrote him this long email about how, he knew all about my tragedy, and so I told him, this is the date that it happened, and I know that it's really inconvenient, and it's Holy Thursday and Holy Week, and I'm really sorry, but do you think that maybe you could perform this ceremony then? Sure, definitely. You name the time.
I love Father Kevin. I've
never
met him. I don't know anything about him other than what you're saying, but he sounds like...
He's amazing.
Yeah. Father Kevin, if you're watching this, you rock.
Yeah, he's incredible. So he performed that ceremony on Holy Thursday. We had all of my fellow candidates and their spouses came.
That's awesome.
Both the RCIA instructors came. And and that was it. We didn't need anybody else
Yeah.
there. And it was such short notice that it's not, and also our families would just be really confused. Like, what do you mean you're getting married again? Our friends, that would have just been kind of weird. And so it was absolutely perfect. We had, I went through RCIA with two other candidates, and they were both in the same position that I was, where they didn't have to be there. They wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we chose them, to do the readings, and it was just so special.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And then of course, on the Easter Vigil, you make your confirmation, and then your first Eucharist. What was that like?
So that was absolutely incredible. There aren't words to describe it. I was so excited, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but as soon as I accepted the Eucharist and then went back, and there are photos on Twitter of like how big I'm smiling, but you can't really see like how much I'm weeping. And it's not crying, and it's not sad. It's just gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you so much for loving me, for never doubting me, and because I really feel like Jesus, he was never concerned. I mean, maybe a little bit, like in the throes of things, he was concerned for my soul, but he was always there for me. He was always there waiting for me to come back to him. And he never was like judgmental because of how upset I was. He was never going to turn his back on me, even though I thought that he did. And still to this day, every time I receive the Eucharist, it's such a blessing. And I go back to the pew and I kneel and I just repeat over and over again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's how it was, like times 1,000% that day. I was smiling so big that my mouth hurt. I was weeping so openly that I left a puddle on the kneeler, and it's something I'll never forget.
I can relate to that, just feeling so filled with gratitude to be Catholic and to be able to just know that you're home, to know that you're there. And you've kind of hinted about a few things with this next question, but what are some of your favorite things about being Catholic? And then we're going to get to some questions from our locals, supporters and Patreons, but our patrons. But what do you, because I have a lot of things that for me, I'm like, oh, I love that part. I love that part. And I'll talk about that a lot. But what about you? Like, what are your favorite, like, maybe they could even be like random things. I don't know.
Okay, so super random. You kind of touched on it. I love it how everyone says, welcome home. Like every time. Like recently I went to the Defending the Faith conference, and there was a whole classroom of people who were kind of listening. And when I went to speak to the host who was speaking that day, and I said, I'm a recent convert who came into, it was Curtis Wright, and he was a part of the RCIA videos that we watched. So I was like, it's totally surreal seeing you. Like, I'm used to watching you, in my living room, wearing my pajamas, taking notes. And like your videos were incredible. Your talk was incredible. Thank you so much. I'm a recent convert. I just came into the church this past Easter, and everybody in the whole room started clapping, and everyone said, welcome home, to the point where like I was blushing. I did like a little curtsy. It's something that like came naturally to me for some reason, but I absolutely love that. And I also, one of my favorite parts is confession, the sacrament of reconciliation, where, you get to lay out everything, and not just during confession. It's even, the week prior to that. Like, it's somebody and something that holds you accountable. And it's an instrument that would have changed my life when I was younger, when I was in college. If I had been raised like this and raised to really respect confession and really understand the meaning of it, to this day, like, there are sometimes, it's just easier to lie, or, it might be easier to, like cut this person off on the highway, or, just take your pick at the sinful things that are easier to do. But then I'm going to have to tell Father Kevin about it. And I don't want to do that because I'm already up to, I've already lied once this week. And so, I think like, well, do you want to tell him that you lied 2 times this week? You've already lied once. So it's somebody that holds me accountable. And, honestly, I'm not really sure you're supposed to think of it like that. Maybe that's kind of pride or something. But for me, I like the fact that I don't do things because there are repercussions of my actions. And, and Jesus is going to be disappointed. Satan's going to be happy. And I'm going to have to tell Father Kevin about it.
I think that's great.
Okay.
I think whatever. I felt like that plenty of times. Like, okay, I'm not in personal relationship world where it's just between me and Jesus, and I just whisper a prayer that is general or whatever, and well, God knows anyway. Like, no, like if I lose my temper at this person or XYZ, I'm gonna have to tell this priest about that. And see, for me, like some people, they like to bounce around to go to different priests because sometimes people go to priests because they're like, oh, I don't want to talk to this priest about that.
Yeah.
I don't like doing that. I like going to the same person so that I don't go, okay, well, this other priest here, he'll never hear this because I'm going over here instead. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
I totally get that. Okay. So welcome home. I love that. Confession. Love that. Give me one more. What's another favorite thing?
Okay. I love, and I think it's so cool how the Catholic Church is truly universal. And I learned in RCA that Catholic actually means universal.
Yeah.
So
you were saying that in your Lutheran church when you were saying the Apostles' Creed,
right.
the Nicene Creed. You just had a little asterisk at the bottom that said universal. Yeah.
So, in Iowa, we can go to Mass, and it'll be pretty much exactly the same as it is in Sorrento, Italy, as it is in any other part of the world. That's amazing. Like, we could go to a Lutheran church. Well, they don't have daily church, but we could go to a Lutheran service on Sunday here, and then we could also go to another Lutheran church, maybe just even a block away, and they'll be completely different, totally different, not even recognizable as the same religion. And that just blows my mind that it's universal, it's for everyone, it's available to everyone. And like when we were in Italy, we brought the Magnificat with us, and we basically... Ooh. Yeah, we could follow along. We knew a little Italian, like we did, about, like I said, like 6 months of research, and part of that included Italian in 10 minutes a day. But, we were able to follow along because because my husband's experience going to the Catholic Mass in English. And that to me just blows my mind. And I think that's really cool too.
I love that. So our patron supporters and our local supporters get the opportunity to ask questions of our guests. So if you're interested in doing that, you can join. Links in the description, of course. And we've got some great questions here. Some of them have to do with what you do now, your ministry on Twitter, which we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute here, because you are very active on Twitter, which is basically the way that you connect with the world. You don't have like all these other forms of social media. Mostly it's Twitter for you, right?
Yep.
And or X. I keep calling it Twitter,
right,
but we're supposed to call it X. Anyway, so some of the questions are about that. But this first one comes to us from one of our local supporters who says, how does Bree protect her mind against thoughts brought up by her past experiences? I ask this question because I have a promiscuous past and I struggle a lot with intrusive thoughts, and they are often sexual in nature because of my past, but I don't want to be thinking these things. It's something I desperately want freedom from, but I'm wondering if she has any steps she takes to protect her mind.
I think that's a really good question. Because so many of us, like I was saying before, like you can be at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, like every day, every hour, and having to claw your way out. And you don't want those those feelings coming back into your head, and really it's Satan again telling you you're not good enough and reminding you of who you were before, or these horrible things that you did, or maybe not even horrible, but like things that you don't want to think about. And I think for me, what really worked was confession, and just hearing those words like "I absolve you" and really letting that sink in. And I heard once in an interview where a person said, they went to confession and were absolved. They did their penance, but they kept thinking about it, and they're like, I don't know, I still feel bad for these things, and then they were told. Then they went back to the same priest and said, I'm not sure that you really heard me what I did, and I'd like to reiterate it. And he basically admonished them, saying, God has forgiven you. Who are you to still hold on to this when you've received the grace and forgiveness from the Lord? So that's something I'd like for people to think about is if you've gone to confession, and it sounds like this person probably has, just remember that God's forgiven you. So why are you yourself holding on to that? Isn't that almost kind of prideful? Isn't that almost kind of like you're putting yourself on God's level? Maybe you should accept that God's forgiven you, and God has offered you his forgiveness, his love. And then also, what Father Kevin's trademark statements. God loves you, and he doesn't want you to be unhappy. You're made in his image. You are a product of him. And, this isn't what you want for yourself, and it's not what God wants for you.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Exorcists speak of how the industry, which you were a part of before, is full of the occult. Did Bree ever witness or experience any occult things as part of what you were doing?
Not really. I mean, every Halloween there was kind of like a mockery of the occult. I myself even did succubus videos and that sort of thing, but it was never anything serious. I think that, Satan works, especially in the adult industry, in a lot more subtle ways. And there was never any kind of like satanic worship that I was aware of, outright, but in a way, like being narcissistic, being, encouraging promiscuity, all of these things are products of Satan, but no, nothing like, sensational like that you would imagine.
Okay. Let's talk about this. Does Bree have any opinions on modesty? And I know you do, but especially during Mass. This is a thing that it's become a popular topic lately to talk about that. I find that it only seems to be something that is pointed toward females, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've really struggled with this myself, actually, because I want to be a witness for others. I want to be a good example to others, and especially with how I used to dress and how, like, the majority of my wardrobe was, really tight, really low cut, really revealing sorts of things. And I can't be that person anymore. I'm not that person anymore. And, like, I've had a lot of difficulty coming to this realization because of like these latent feminist ideas in my head that I was raised with of like, I shouldn't have to cover up just because you can't control your sexual urges. Like, that's not fair to me. But then I think to myself, well, okay, first of all, I should, especially at Mass, be conservative, be modest, be feminine, but be like Mary, like Saint Clare, like these women really not only, I don't think that they dressed the way that they did in order to keep men from lusting after them as much as they dressed that way because they valued their femininity and they valued, you know, being the type of women who are cognizant of how they look to others and how their appearance might affect a man. And so I still sometimes in my mind get these thoughts of like, it's not my responsibility to keep you from lusting of me. But yeah, it is. It is my responsibility. And especially at Mass. As a convert, I really want to do everything correctly. And so, I don't expose my shoulders. I wear a veil. But at the same time, yeah, I still like the dress I wore to Mass today. I haven't worn that dress in years, and I put it on and I was like, that's a little low cut. So like all throughout Mass, I'm like trying to adjust myself because I want to be the best Catholic I can be. And given my previous career, I also want to be completely cognizant of how exposure of my skin may affect males. And I also want to be a witness to others, an inspiration, an example. And then I want to be like Mary, like Saint Clare. I want to be the type of woman who values my femininity, who values, my body as something that's beautiful and reserved just for my husband.
Great answer.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's a tough thing because there seems to be this, well, if you're too worried about it, then where does that stop? And then people want to label you as some kind of prude or something or whatever. But I just say I would rather be way too far on the one side than even dance around over here with this other stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot more danger on the side of immodesty than there is on the side of being too concerned about it. But okay, thank you so much for that question. I got another one here. And you kind of answered this. The other question was how have her experiences affected how she relates to masculinity and femininity, but I feel like that kind of relates to that. You're thinking about what that truly means to be feminine is to be set apart for the Lord. And that's true femininity is modesty and holiness. This question reads, Bree seems to be the target of unwarranted criticism in the social media sphere since leaving her former life and embracing Catholicism. Does she perceive these attacks as having a diabolical component? And if so, what safeguards does she have in place to protect her psychological and spiritual health? Now, let me just kind of set the stage with this question before you jump right into it. You're very active on Twitter. You talk a lot about the Lord, but you're also open with what you used to do. And because of that, people are constantly throwing your past in your face and calling you all sorts of horrible names, telling you have no right to say anything about God or religion or your own life, and you should just disappear and do whatever. And what I found to have been the most tragic, I guess, in my opinion, would be when those attacks have come from other Catholics who, in my opinion, should be embracing you and welcoming you. But they're just like, well, I don't want to hear from you. What do you, and they just want to throw your past in your face. How do you, and anybody that follows you is probably asking the same question right now. How do you deal with that in light of this question here?
It's like multifaceted. First of all, I have to accept that, yes, I did those things. I was a pornographer who dressed scantily for money. I emotionally abused men in order to use them and manipulate them. I was a sinner. I'm still a sinner. Like, spoiler, we all are sinners. I'm going to continue to sin. That's not anything that's a surprise to me. But one thing, like, there are several things that really helps me when people attack. Like, first of all, I kind of think of it as almost like a kind of penance, because I did this for so many years, and now this is my cross to bear, is like people's insults, and I'm able to handle it now. Prior to my conversion, like I said, I used to just, I loved it when I was known as the person who would just completely tear you apart. Like, other women in the industry feared me, and I reveled in that. Now, like, because of what I did then, I'm going to accept it, like, what would Jesus do, kind of a scenario. And really, in a way, it's my penance, it's my cross to bear, but also it's my pride. Like, there's documented proof. It's my pinned tweet. I said I was going to change. Now, what if I start, tearing into people? I'm not going to be that person again. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to be that person again. All of these amazing, like, people and God himself, like, have recruited me to be Catholic. Like, I'm not going to, don't try and test me, Satan. I'm not falling for it.
Not today, Satan.
Exactly. Yep. And so that's part of it also. And then, there's the old adage of hurt people. And it's much easier for me to see a tweet as coming from a person who's potentially hurting now than it was before. It's much easier for me to consider that, like, this person is perhaps, ashamed of what they're doing, ashamed of maybe what they've done. I don't know their story. I don't know who they are. Maybe their dog just died. Or like, maybe, something just happened with their wife. Maybe their husband left them for a porn producer. I don't know. And it could be any number of things. And so I'm not going to just be super quick to judge and jump on them and tear them apart. I'm not going to be that person anymore. And so for the most part, I don't correct people when they call me. They say that, thousands of men have seen me naked. That wasn't the case, but it's not, I don't care. On one hand, like, it's my penance. I'll take it. And also, like, so in that respect, I don't care, but also I don't care because I'm super tight with God now. Like, he chose me. He is in me. I am in him. And, like, and that's all that matters. And anything that anybody could say is not going to affect that. It's not going to change that. I'm not going to let it change that. That's so important to me. I guard it. And so I accept all sorts of different things for all of those reasons. And also, I do have an amazing quote that I've read before on one other podcast.
Well, let's hear it.
That really speaks just tremendously to not allowing yourself to fall into the trap of vitriol and argument, mainly just for perseverance. And it's a quote from Saint Theodorus the Ascetic. He says, "If you love Christ, you must keep the passion of rancor far from your soul. You should on no account yield to feelings of hostility. Rancor lurking in the heart is like fire hidden in stalks of dry flax. Rather, you should pray fervently for anyone who has grieved you, and you should help him if you have the means. By this action, your soul shall be delivered from death, and nothing will hinder your communication with God.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
Which saint was that again?
Theodoros, the
Saint Theodora.
ascetic.
Well-
The one thing I do want to mention, though,
Yeah.
okay, so I'll take all sorts of things that people have to throw at me, except there's one thing that really I do not accept. I don't accept it for myself. I don't accept it for you. I don't accept it for anybody. When people say, you're too far gone, you're too far to be saved, why even bother? Like, Jesus will not forgive you. No. Nobody is too far gone. Nobody has sinned so greatly that God will turn away from them. Nobody is beyond God's mercy and forgiveness.
Amen. Man, I'm glad you said that. That's a great line to drop, because it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We all need him. In your interactions with people on Twitter and stuff, have you, and I know that like when you started doing this, most of the people that were on there were from your past.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had some stories of people who have seen your example and have walked away from that too?
Mm-hmm. Several different women who are producers of pornography have asked me for guidance. There have been many men who have, asked for my forgiveness. Even past clients of mine have told me that they've given up pornography and are now considering Catholicism.
Wow.
I'd never had any, I thought that I would, I'd post this tweet and I'd lose a bunch of followers and I'd get a job at some fast food restaurant and I'd be happy, definitely. But I never, ever thought that I would be in the place that I am now. Mm-hmm.
So for your job now, you make beautiful rosaries. And I know a lot of people make rosaries, but you have a different thing going on. Tell everybody a little bit about how that started and what that's about for you.
Yeah. So, I really liked working from home. I'm able to spend time with my dogs. And so I thought maybe, just maybe, there might be a way that I could possibly still do something from home. And I've always been really artistic, really creative. And I happened to study jewelry design when I was younger. And so I think it was like a joke. I said to my husband, I was like, what if I made rosaries? And he was like, you should do that. I'm like, no, come on. No, really, you should do that. And so I started researching, like, well, what's the history of the rosary? What kind of rosaries are out there? And I've always been the kind of person who really likes like quality items that last for a long time. And I was looking around, and it seems like the majority of the rosaries out there that are for sale are plastic, or the kind like strung on just string that even this one woman at Mass who sits near us, she always has like a half broken rosary that she's praying with, and she always has to carry like 3 or 4 of them. I asked her about them once, and she said she always has to carry at least 3 of them, because in order to pray the whole thing, because half of like the pieces are missing and she has to go to the next one. Like this one has a crucifix, but it only has 2 decades, and so I thought, well, I want to make something pretty unique, and I want to make something that's truly beautiful. And there aren't that many people out there that are making rosaries out of actual like natural gemstones. And so I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? It's not going to succeed. And I've been blown away by the support, like by my sales, by the custom orders that I receive. Like, a woman ordered a custom rosary for her daughter's first communion. Another priest ordered a custom rosary. He wanted to celebrate his graduation from seminary. Like, and these are people who are ordering from me, knowing full well what I did in my previous life. And they're ordering from me because I've converted, because of who I was and who I am now. And that blows me away. I had a custom order for this guy who has 10 children, bless him, and he wanted 10 different pocket rosaries for each of his 10 kids. And like, he came to a former porn star for that, to get rosaries made for his kids. So like, as much as you see on Twitter, like even Catholics who throw me hate, the majority of it has been incredible support, and it blows me away every day. Just like how much love people give me and how welcoming they've been, and just it's just incredible. Just the love, you can really feel the Catholic love.
I love when Catholics embrace new people,
Mm-hmm.
because I was that way. You know, I was new, and I remember feeling so welcomed by people, and I love doing that for others and seeing others have that experience. So that is amazing. And I'll put a link in the description to your rosary shop in case people want to inquire more about that. I mean, your rosaries are one of a kind. Every single one is handmade from incredible materials that are designed. These aren't casual rosaries. These are like heirloom quality. You
Right.
pass them down to your kids. So, but we'll let people know where they can
Thank you.
can connect with you on that. Okay, I just have a couple more questions because I'm doing this thing now on these interviews called Most Important Questions, and they're the same questions. Spoiler alert for everybody, but every guest is going to answer them a little bit differently. Okay, and the first one is this, and these are in general, right? Like, what is the most important thing for someone who is considering Catholicism to know or do?
Okay, I'd say it's actually a question that he or she needs to ask him or herself. Ask yourself, who invented Catholicism? Like, you can say, who invented the Lutheran religion? Well, it was a man named Martin Luther. Who invented Catholicism? It was Jesus. Jesus is the inventor of Catholicism. And when I heard that, like, it was in RTIA, so I'd already, like, jumped in with both feet. But that just solidified my decision 200% more. And I'd never thought about that before, that he and his apostles are the inventors of not just this religion, but a lot of what we do in Mass. And that's pretty awesome.
So just to set the record straight, it wasn't Constantine?
No.
Google it, right? It'll tell you. Okay, that's great. Okay, question number 2. What is the most important thing new converts should know or do? And this is perfect for you because that's where you are right now. What would you say to other people who are, I love Catholicism, it's great, I'm involved, I'm jumped in with both feet, just like you. What do you tell someone like that?
Okay, well, I think kind of just a summary of a lot of things I've said already. Remember the sacrament of healing, confession. Remember to really take advantage of that, to give into it as much as you just remember that you're going to receive just as much as you put into it. And remember also, that during that time, the priest isn't judging you. He actually doesn't retain any of these memories. He will never, ever, ever let on that he even heard what you were saying. And also remember that the Eucharist is the greatest gift ever. I mean, I think I just said that confession was a great gift, but yeah, it gets even greater in the Eucharist. And remember why you wanted to be Catholic in the first place, and don't let it slip away. Don't, like, you may not be on fire for the faith every single moment of every single day. Nobody is. And you may not be on fire for the faith even like one day out of the week, but that'd be really cool if you were. And maybe, daily mass doesn't fit in with your schedule or something like that, but everybody has time for a really cool docudrama on Formed, like find ways to inspire yourself, even if they're not conventional, even if it's not, going to daily mass or sitting at the adoration chapel, praying the rosary every day. I know that you suggest those things, and those are important things, but maybe if you're not there yet or you're still kind of resistant to that, like find other ways to inspire you. Read a cool novel. Read, your novels. Your first novel was, I thought it was absolutely hilarious.
It's not really a novel. It's more of a
Right.
biography, but maybe I should write a novel someday. I
Yeah.
don't know. But
Your biography, your first book, it really, what I think that really it should be required reading for anyone in RCIA, and the Convert's Guide to Your First Year in Catholicism. And what I really enjoyed so much about it is how funny it was, because it was so relatable. Like I'm laughing out loud on like every other page, underlining everything, because I'm like, ditto, done that, been there, yep, and maybe if a person didn't come from a Protestant background, they wouldn't find it quite as relatable or like quite as in sync with their own story, maybe not quite as funny, and so I'm gonna give it a little like maybe it's not for everybody, but find ways. My advice is find ways to inspire you at least every other day. And don't jump into everything all at once. You don't need to do everything all at once.
yeah.
But find ways to inspire you. If it's praying the rosary, if it's listening to podcasts, for me, when I'm feeling kind of uninspired, I'll watch a docudrama on Formed, because I love those. My gosh, learning more about the saints and that that platform, that app, if you will, I guess it would be called, is just so good for that. And a lot of churches will give you a free login, a free subscription. That's how I log into Formed, is through my church.
Yeah, I think our church has that too, and I think
Yeah.
it's probably something people can look into. It's basically like a Catholic Netflix kind of a thing,
Right.
where they have all these different things. Is that some of how you became so knowledgeable about the faith
Yes.
so fast? Because
Yeah.
one thing people talk about, they're like, how did this girl learn so much about the church? Because you're not. I tend to like live in the mainstream things that most people are learning, but like you come up with this obscure stuff sometimes, and people are like, where did you learn about that?
Just imagine, like I still work from home. I still am pretty isolated, and my eyes and my hands are busy all day making rosaries, but my ears are available. So I'll put on a docudrama, and I can get a lot out of it, just glancing up every few minutes, and then a lot of times I'll just let it play on its own and see where it takes me. And a lot of times it'll take me to some obscure subject that I'd never even heard of, or like some rare novena, and I want to learn more about that.
Yeah.
And so I'll actually like pause it, and during my next break, I'll go into some Google deep dive of like this person or this novena or this tradition or this church, and it's all just fascinating for me. And that's how I stay on fire for the faith, is I'm always learning about new things. But the new convert needs to find that fire for themselves, and just the way that they can be, inspired on a daily basis.
What is the most important thing for those who've been Catholic for 20 years? The idea is, the considering the new convert. What about the person who's like, yeah, I've been Catholic forever, I already know all this stuff?
The thing I want to say to Catholics who've been in the church for 20 years is, you're a role model. You're a role model. act that way.
That's great advice. You talk about, you recognize you're a role model.
Mm-hmm.
They're a role model too. We all are in a certain degree, but I think for those people who've been in the church that long, we need them.
Mm-hmm.
We need them to show us the way.
Yeah.
We've come into this. We're like, okay, we're new. What do we do here?
Mm-hmm.
We need them to teach us. We need them to model the faith for us. And it's a treasure. I think you'll agree when you find those people who are willing to do that.
Yes.
And step up to that role.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going from here, Bree? Tell everybody the goal. Like where do you want to see yourself doing in 5 years?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no doubt that I'm still going to be on fire for the faith, God willing. And I say that not in a I'm amazing kind of way. I say that in I remember what it was like before I had God. I remember what it was like when I turned my back on God, and I never want to be that person again. I never want to be that miserable and wishing I were dead and drinking profusely and sleeping around. No, I never want to be like that again. So in 5 years, I think that, I hope that people will still want to talk to me, even, not necessarily interviews, but maybe just that I'll have Catholic friends who still want to go to lunch with me and discuss all these amazing things. I really hope that I'm still going to be watching docudramas on Formed, making rosaries, on fire for the faith. And that's really all that I need in life, I think. I don't know. I'll see what God has in store for me.
Well, I'm very proud of you.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I'm proud of you all the time. I see your stuff sometimes and I'm just like, wow, that was amazing. Or I see how you respond to someone else. And it's an honor for me to have you here to share this with our audience. So thank you for taking the time to come here. And I'm especially honored that you've allowed me to get to meet your husband too. And we're all having a great time together. So it's been so great. And I want you to know just to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And that really is a witness to people as well. Awesome. So thank you, Bree.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, friends, thank you so much for taking time to watch this interview. I'll put links in the description to where you can find Bree's Rosary Shop and her X feed if that's something that you're interested in. And I want to say a special thank you to those of you who have supported our ministry through Locals and Patreon. That's how we're able to do things like bring guests out here for these interviews. And we've got many more coming. So I'm so thankful. But most of all, I just want you to understand that this channel is a place of community. It's a place of help for others. So if this video, do you think would be helpful to someone in your life, please share it. Let people see it, because I guarantee you this, the stuff that you heard Bree talk about, maybe your situation or their situation is different, but we all have that experience of being at the bottom and needing the Lord to call to us. And he is calling to us, but we just need to listen. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to being back here with you next time for another great interview. Take care, everybody, and God bless. Thanks for listening to Catholic Feedback with Keith Nestor. Send in your questions and comments to feedback@catholicfeedback.com. This podcast is brought to you by Stewardship, a mission of faith, and is also supported by our team at patreon.com/Keith Nestor. Please consider joining our support team. Catholic Feedback is a production of Down to Earth Ministries. For more information about Down to Earth or to bring me to your parish or event, visit down2earthministry.org. See you next time.